Hi, this is David Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Whether you're watching with our friends, your friends, my friends, all of the friends over at Eternity Time, whoever you watch or listen to your podcast, as always, it's wonderful to have you along. Yeah, it's wonderful to be here. It's certainly a thrill. I'd like to take you home with us. I'd like to take you home. If you get the reference, I was in elementary school when that came out. But anyway, I want to put this into a context, what I want to talk about this week. Full disclosure, this is pre-recorded. The Rabbi Orlofsky Show has been pre-recorded because I'm in America right now, and I just finished the Project Inspire convention. And so I'm going to talk about the Project Inspire convention, which hasn't happened yet because time is relative, as Einstein has explained to us. And I have relatives, and they're never on time. But I want to tell you, based on my past experiences, what I think. But first and foremost, we have a sponsor of this episode, and it is sponsored anonymously. Hi, Rabbi. We love your shiurim, and I love that you love my shiurim. I really do. I cannot tell you. This is it. I have nothing in my life really at this point. I don't have any jobs. I don't go anywhere. Most of the day, I just sit around and listen to people tell me how much they enjoy the podcast, which takes about an hour out of my week. And the rest of the time, I just sit here and slowly slip into dementia. Thanks for the smiles and the chizuk, such a special gift to us all. I can't tell you how much that means to me. You should know that I know that I'm giving chizuk, and I've told you this before. The Rabbi Moshe Shapiro said that anyone who could do anything today that gives people chizuk, you're mechuyev to do it. And the fact that people get chizuk from this is really the most worthwhile thing I have. May you and your family be blessed abundantly with much gratitude for all the chizuk and the smiles and parnosa. And shidduchim. Yeah, those of you who are really good daveners out there, I need a shidduch for Rachel Bas Sima and Miriam Bas Sima and Mindel Bas Sima. And I'll throw in Moshe Yehuda Ben Sima. So, like I say, I'd like to make some chasanas and see them. To me, I think it's a wonderful thing. Somebody told me, what's the difference between Sheva Brachas and Gehenim? In Gehenim, you get off on Shabbos. I think that's a kind of negative attitude. I love Sheva Brachas. I think it's a lot of fun. Parties could be better than that. I'll tell you, the opposite is not so much fun. Klal Yisrael lost one of their greats not that long ago, and Alta Yachnis, Rabbi Alta, that was beloved by so many. We davened for him here on the show, and he's just been a good friend and a tremendous thing. And trust me, simchas are much better than that. I told the story that when I went to visit him in the hospital, he was fighting for his life, and he grabs my hand and he holds with a grip and he says, "Where's the podcast?" So, Baruch Hashem, people get chizuk from it. That's important. So I want to talk about the Project Inspire convention. Now, I can't really talk about this year's, like I say, even though it has just finished, but I wasn't there yet. I'm recording this in advance. But I was there a few years ago, and I had the schus to be there about 3 times. I would have to say that it's the... Okay, I haven't been to every event in the Jewish calendar. I've been to a lot of them. And I can tell you, I think it's probably the most important, if not, I'll say one of the most important, to cover myself, events that Klal Yisrael has. It's just so incredibly inspiring. First of all, they bring a lineup of the who's who of Klal Yisrael. And just to see the Torah giants who come to this event, besides people like me, and cast of others. And there's not even enough time for everybody. They had the last convention I was at. They had Yosef Mendelovich, they barely had time for him. They had Tuvia Singer. I think he got one session. I mean, he's one of the most brilliant advocates for Judaism against the missionaries, and etc. So it's just an amazing thing. But I want to put what I think makes Project Inspire so important into a context, and I'll tell you a story. I was the Long Island director of NCSY for 9 years. I took over a region that was worse than non-existent, because when something is totally non-existent, it's a blank slate, you can basically do whatever you want. That's always interesting when you see a new yeshiva starts or a new seminary starts. You don't really know what it is. And I'm always amazed that people go to a brand new seminary or a brand new yeshiva, and the people who are recruiting say different things to different people. Yeah, there are times that people start off with an image of making a particular type of yeshiva or seminary, and based on the people they attract, it's a completely different one. What do? You teach the ones that come. You deal with whoever it is. So that's the situation. But when I took over Long Island NCSY, they had gone through 5 directors in 2 years. Now, there's no better way to destroy your credibility than to have somebody come in and say, I'm the new director. And he goes around to a bunch of shuls and he introduces himself and he says, we're going to be making activities. And he goes to one shul and they plan a Shabbaton. And a month later, he's gone. And another guy comes in and he says, I'm the director and we're going to meet with all the people, etc. And you go through 5 of these in 2 years. So by the time I walked in, it wasn't just that there was nobody left in the region, but it was the credibility was less than nothing, because, okay, here comes another one. And it makes it that much more difficult. So I understood early on. I was lucky. I was lucky in that I got to start in NCSY by running a chapter in Los Angeles. And so I learned how to build the organization from the beginning. And I was also an advisor to Shabbaton. I had the opportunity to work with kids in that context. So I got to see what it is to be a chapter advisor and a regular advisor. And I got to understand the organization. Also, when I was tricked into taking my first chapter, I really knew nothing about NCSY. And I went down to the West Coast office, and it was one of the more developed regions, at least when I was there, 1978. Lee Sampson was the OU director. He had started as the NCSY director, and he built it up to the point that it was it also became a region of the OU. So he was dealing with the adult programming, and he hired someone to do the NCSY programming, and that was the one who tricked me into taking a chapter. And then shortly after that, he quit. So I had this job and had no idea what was going on. So Lee Sampson was filling in as regional director, but he had all of the responsibilities of the adults. It was pretty tough. So I'm coming into an organization, I know nothing about it, and I have nobody to teach me. So I go down to regional office and I did something that I found out later that nobody had done. I read through everything. Every piece of paper that I could find, every file, every form of booklet, every program that had ever been made. I didn't realize that this made me the second most knowledgeable person of West Coast NCSY. The first was Lee Sampson, and the second one was me, because everybody flies by the seats of their pants. Nobody really knows what they're doing. It's amazing to me how people do this. I had that chapter in Los Angeles for 1 year, and then I went to Long Island, and I remember I was trying to figure out what to do. And I looked for regional directors who had been around for a while. And, some of them wouldn't even talk to me. Some had nothing to offer me. But the one who had done the most creative programming, he had been regional director for 7 years, was Rabbi Itchy Lowenbrown down in Baltimore. And I had met him at National Convention, and I asked him if I could come down and meet with him about programming. He says, sure. And we set up a date. So sure. So I drove down to Baltimore. I think it was my first time ever in Baltimore that I know of. And I was looking for exactly where he was, and I called him up. Well, no cell phones back then. I had to find a payphone, yeah. And I said, hi, I'm just trying to find out where you're located. He says, where are you? I said, I'm here in Baltimore. I'm on Rice-Town Road, I think, He goes, you're in Baltimore? So I said, yeah, we were supposed to meet today. He goes, oh, okay. So he tells me how to get to where he is, and I come to him. And he looks at me, and he says, I'm doing this for 7 years. You're the first person who ever came to ask me, what am I doing and how to do it? I've met regional directors coming and going, and no one ever asked me what I'm doing and how I run it. And he gave me copies of his booklets and of his programming and of everything he had. And most people just, more or less make it up as they go along. So because there was nothing there, I was able to really think how I wanted to build this thing. It was really interesting. So one of the things I realized is I need staff. And I have to get those people. I'll give you an example. My philosophy is, if you have the ability to reach out to 100 people, you could reach out to 100 kids, or you could reach out to 100 advisors, and each one of them have the potential to reach 100 kids. Makes more sense, right? So I had a group dedicated to developing advisors, and we had classes, and we had, discussions and speakers and techniques, and to try to help them get better at their job. In fact, I know one of the big problems that happens in organizational work is burnout. I know that for myself. So I would tell them, I want you to keep a log when you drive someplace, and I'm going to pay you, at the time I think it was 15 cents a mile. That was the official income tax you were allowed to reimburse somebody for mileage, for gas and wear and tear. And I said, I'll pay you for your mileage, and I'll pay you for your phone calls. Keep track. And everyone was like, no, it's okay. I said, no, I don't need you to be a martyr for the cause. I don't want you to sit here and spend all this money and spend all this time and then at the end feel like you're being taken advantage of. I want you to know that at least on some level, I appreciate what you're doing and I want to reimburse you. That was my attitude. And I cited the line from General Patton, who says, you don't win wars by dying for your country. You win wars by making the other guy die for his country. I said, I'm not looking for anyone to die for the cause. I appreciate so much what you're doing. So I would have the advisors, and I'd bring them in, and we would talk about different topics. So we had a advisor training Shabbaton, and I remember in the afternoon, Shabbos afternoon, we had a panel discussion about the role of yeshiva kids in NCSY. Now, let's be fair. When we say yeshiva kids, we don't mean Beis Yaakov the Rebbe Meir and guys learning in the mirror. You understand? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about kids who are going to the local co-ed day schools, who definitely need Chizuk, right? Needless to say. So we brought down 3 of the principals from 3 of the schools to talk about the role of day school kids in NCSY. And they all said the same thing. If the kids are coming because they want to try to help the non-from kids and to mechazik them, etc. So, all right, so then maybe there's a reason, but otherwise, of course, they don't belong. It's so ironic that these kids went to co-ed high schools and they didn't think it was appropriate for them to be in a co-ed organization, but okay. So they said, they all said the same thing, more or less. And a number of the advisors had gone to their schools and had gone through NCSY and had graduated and were now advisors. And one of them raised their hand and said, Kvod Rav, we never went to NCSY to give. We went to NCSY to get. The principal did a little double take. Says, you understand, I've been benching since I was 5. Right? I went to sleepaway camp where whichever table benches the loudest, they get a watermelon, you know? By the time you're a teenager, nobody wants to bench anymore. The average teenager benches like this. Can I go? Says, there was no way you benched. I'll do it again. Okay, can I go now? They're totally uninspired. He says, but when I go to NCSY and I see some kid with an earring and a ponytail, I'm talking about the boys, yeah, breaking his teeth on his NCSY transliterated bencher to try to bench, I said, wow, I've got something I didn't appreciate. And it inspired me in ways that I can't describe. I had advisors who came in and they were working or they were doing whatever, and they ended up, quitting their jobs and going for smicha and going to Habatzas Torah because they were inspired. I always say that, the ideal advisors in an organization like this, it's supposed to be a symbiotic relationship. You're not just giving, you're getting. And if you're not getting and you're just giving, okay, but then you're missing the point. How do you get surrounded by all of these kids who are struggling? So there's somebody, I don't want to mention his name. I once mentioned his name and his wife got upset, and I'm not going to mention any names. But he was going back to learn for smicha and to go to Habatzas Torah. And I didn't say anything bad, and still she got upset. I don't know. Yeah, people are sensitive. I guess they just don't like the being in the public eye. I know how they feel. I'm terribly shy myself, and I hate it when people draw attention to myself. Anyway, but by the way, that is ironic because I am actually shy. I've been thrust into a public position. How do you know when a person is shy or not? So my good friend Chanach Tella, I went to one of his children's chasanas in America. And in America, you have to make the tables. In Israel, we don't make the tables. Everyone just sits wherever they sit, But you have to actually make the tables. And apparently there's a chachma to it because, at each table, you try to put like a live wire who's going to be there to keep the table going. And he had the mistaken impression that I was one of them. And of course, I just sit at the table quietly. I eat all the coleslaw and pickles, you know what I mean? And I just sit there staring off into space. I'm not bored because I have ADD and I can go anywhere I want and just wander around. But I'm by nature shy, in fact, when I got my first NCSY chapter, I was so painfully shy. I mean, I was so afraid to talk to people. I remember this now. It was 1978. 1977, 78. I'm trying to remember now. Anyway, I stood on the corner, if you know Los Angeles, of Fairfax and Beverly, and I just said hello to people who were passing by. And each time I did, something inside of me died. That's how painful it was. Now, it was in L.A. at that time. Today, they would kill you. But back then, they would just smile. Yeah. Most people would say hello back. Some people would just look at you like you were crazy. They were the New Yorkers who were visiting. But California people were like, hey, yeah, hi. I was practicing because when I would go to events and my meetings, I made an effort to talk to every kid for at least a few minutes. I remember this one girl came in and she always had this sort of sour look on her face, but I have a policy. I'm a black and white kind of guy. And I would go over and I would start talking to her, for 2 or 3 minutes. And she would just look at me. And I would maintain a monologue for 2 or 3 minutes. I'd walk away and I'd be like, ah. it's ironic because 2 months later, we had a Shabbaton, and she sits down and just starts talking to me. I was like, what happened? He goes, it takes me a long time to warm up. So I'm by nature a shy person. And this is how you know who a shy person is, is when in Israel, where there is no seating, when I go to a bar mitzvah, I always look for an empty table. I sit there by myself. I get my little plate of 3 or 4 starches, potato bureka and Yerushalmi kugel and, some vegetables that were cooked, sometime before Shavuos, and it's like sad-looking vegetables on the table. And I eat my little thing, sit at the table, wait long enough till they take the picture. And I leave. I'm not a social person. If somebody comes over to me and says, "Oh, Rabbi Orlofsky, I talk to you," I'm happy to talk. But just to be like one of those chevra man who go over and just start schmoozing, it's very hard for me. I'm very shy, by nature. It was all the beatings, I think, when I was a child. But anyway, so I'm in a story. I'm trying to remember how I got here, but I was in a chapter. Anyway, so I'll go back to the original. I don't remember how I got here, but he says, they said, we didn't come to NCSY. Oh, that's what I said. The most effective people are the people who are giving and getting at the same time, so that they're experiencing that growth. It's not just me. And that's the ideal. The ideal is when people are giving and getting. So these yeshiva kids, they said, we came to NCSY to get, not to give. That wasn't our intention. We looked at these people who were struggling, and we were inspired by what they were doing. I mention that because Project Inspire is based on a principle that Rabbi Noach Weinberg believed very much. And that is, like I said, if you can work with 100 people and you work with 100 advisors, that's more effective than working with 100 kids. So Rabbi Noach Weinberg at one time went down to Lakewood and gave a series of shiurim in order to get the guys in Lakewood to get involved in Kiruv, and he didn't get any results to speak of. And so he basically thought, okay, well, we tried that, didn't work. But his Talmidim picked up the baton, and they said, and I think the phrase they used was to wake the sleeping giant, which means that if we could mass the troops of the Frum community to get involved in Kiruv Rechokim, this is this massive resource that has the ability to be able to go and change people's lives. And so you come to the Project Inspired Convention ostensibly to learn how to do Kiruv, what to say to non-Frum people, techniques. Basically, that's what the talks are about. Is how we can go out and do things. And they have various people whose lives have been changed from people who reached out to them. And they intersperse the Shabbos with these stories of these people who've changed their lives around because some Frum Balabos took an interest in them. Between me and you, most of the people who come to the Shabbos are very much like those advisors of mine who said, we never came to NCSY to give, we came to get. It is one of the most inspiring, I'm speaking as one of the speakers, it's one of the most inspiring events that exists in Klal Yisrael. You can see the Havdalah. They have a Havdalah with a band and they're singing that. These are Frum people, They're sitting there and they're at the Havdalah and they're singing. They're not learning techniques of how to make Havdalah for non-Frum people. They are deeply moved last convention, I was on a panel like 12 o'clock at night on a Friday night. And I think one of the first things I said is, what's wrong with you people? You're supposed to be Frum Jews. Why aren't you in bed at 10 o'clock like every Frum Jew is on a Friday night? They're there at everything. They're soaking it up. They love it. We need inspiration, because without that inspiration, it's cult. It's cold. It's dark. Our avodas Hashem is a sad thing. So this place is packed. It's packed. It's packed. It's packed with Frum people. I'm going to tell you an interesting story. The first time I was at a Project Inspire convention, so all the rabbis were at the faculty table, except for me. I was sitting at a table with Hasidim. Anyway, they're firing questions at me. Basic hashkafa questions, and they're shooting questions out. And okay, I've answered these questions in the past. We're dealing with them. So I said to one of the people in charge, I said, hey, how come I don't get to sit with the other rabbis? He goes, you were requested. Apparently, I have a big following in the Hasidic community. I remember there was one Shabbos, I had a number of Bavava Hasidim. They have a yeshiva in Bat Yam, and Yiddish is clearly their first language, but they listen to the podcast. I don't know how much of they chap, but they know enough English, and they wanted to come for Shabbos Suda because they appreciate the what we're doing on this podcast. So somebody told me, goes, you have a big following in Borough Park, I was like, no, I didn't know. But apparently we do, and they were asking me, so I don't know why of all of the big names there, they chose me. I don't know why, but they were asking a lot of basic hashkafa questions. I was very happy to answer them. But it means that there are Frum Yidden who don't know the basics of Yiddishkeit. They don't know the answers. They don't have the inspiration. If I can borrow one of my most famous lines, which I mentioned this a long time ago on my 60th birthday. My children wrote a rap for me of a collection of some of my most famous lines. I have my friend Rabbi Zev Redman on his 60th birthday. He made a siyum on Yerushalmi. Okay. But anyway, but he didn't get a rap. Okay. So, but the chorus was one of my favorite lines. Everybody does what everybody does because that's what everybody does. Yeah. I say it all the time. Everybody does what everyone does because everybody does. And so most people are Frum because most people are Frum. But to get down to it, and I have such respect for these people who wanted to answer basic questions because it wasn't enough just to say, that is what we do. They want to have an understanding. And that's what Project Inspire does, is that it gives the Frum people the security. Let me tell you the following. I used to teach in Or L'Gola, which was a rabbinical training program. And part of the course that I was doing was how to answer basic questions on Judaism. And so I used to tell them the hardest question to answer is the question you haven't answered for yourself. So if you're not comfortable with the answer, you're going to have trouble answering it for somebody else, obviously. And the way I used to put it is, if in your heart of hearts you are a male chauvinist, then don't answer questions about women in Judaism because you're not going to answer it correctly. A guy once said, a woman was asking me a question and I gave your answer and she said, you're patronizing me. I said, you know why she said that to you? Because you were patronizing her. He says, but you give those answers. I said, I believe it. That's the difference. I'm not just saying it. It's real. So if you don't believe it, if you really think women are inferior, then don't try to answer how the Torah says that they're not, because you don't believe it. So the question you have to answer is for yourself. And the more that we get it down clear, then obviously if you're going to go into Kiruv, try to speak to an unfrom person and you yourself are not sure of the answer or you're not comfortable with it. I've told this story more than once. And I was teaching all the Golas. Someone said to me, what's the hardest questions for you to answer? So there's a few of them. One is, rabbis, everything you're saying is right. How come so many from people look miserable? I've been answering, at the time I was answering this question for like 20 years. And I would say it over to from audiences. I said, they want to know if Judaism is so wonderful, why do so many from people look miserable? So somebody ratted on me to Rabbi Orlofsky, who was, of course, my Bekiyas Rebbe in 1975 in Chavetz Chaim. And he says to me, David, calls me up to give me Musa. He says, David, you can't say that. You can say they look miserable, but you can't say they're miserable. I said, Rebbe, I hear what you're saying. The only thing is, I've been asking this question to from audiences for 20 years, and they never said that to me. They explained to me why they're miserable. So you're right. I mean, it's a kasha. It could be that they're not miserable, but they tell me that they are. So what am I supposed to do with that? So obviously, if you don't look like you're enjoying the party, you're not gonna get anybody to join. It's got to be the kind of thing where people feel it. So this doesn't. So ostensibly, Project Inspire is to inspire from people to go out and do Kiruv, but I say the real thing that Project Inspire does is it inspires from people to be inspired Jews. And that is so incredibly important. Let me tell you an interesting story. There's a Rav in a Rosh Hashiva in Brooklyn, Rabbi Zucker. And turns out he's one of my fans, Baruch Hashem. And I mention this because my nephew wanted to get into one of his programs, and he didn't meet all the qualifications, but he says, look, if your uncle comes down and speaks in the yeshiva, we'll make an exception. And I said, my pleasure. Next time I'm in America, I'll be there, So we were talking, and he told me the following story, which I thought was poignant. He said, the Aguda came down to me. He says they want to make a series of lectures about Kedushas Habayis. Taking out the internet and this and the next thing, things like that. This is what Rabbi Zucker says to me. He goes, and I look at them and I said, are you out of your mind? Do you think that's the problem with Klal Yisrael? He says, you should be sending Rabbi Orlofsky around to all of these from shuls to do his Why Be Jewish, to teach people why they should be from Jews. I said, what happened? Because I don't know, I never heard from them again. But, the fact is, like I saw as I'm sitting with these Hasidic couples, they don't know. They don't know why we're doing what we're doing. My Why Be Jewish, which basically is the first two lines of Mesilas Yesharim and explains why we should be from Jews. I got email from a guy in his 40s who's still learning in Koilo and Lakewood and says, until I heard this, I didn't know why I'm a from Jew. I got a phone call from a guy learning in the Mir in his 20s. He says, until I heard that, I didn't know why I'm a from Jew. It's online someplace. I'm sure you can find it if you want. But the point is that people want the basics. People want to be inspired. So the topic I wanted to talk about today, and I'm almost out of time, but what I wanted to talk today is inspiration. And we have to learn how to be inspired. Otherwise, you can run the risk of what Yeshayahu Hanavi refers to as mitzvahs anoshim elimudai, doing things by rote, without any understanding, without any feeling, and we just do what we do because that's what we do, And instead, we should figure out how to be inspired. Think about this just for a moment. The Gemara says, back when there was just Shmona Esrei, that's all that the davening was. It says the Hasidim Rishonim would spend an hour before davening, meaning before Shmona Esrei, an hour saying Shmona Esrei, and an hour coming down from the experience. So what was that hour beforehand? The hour beforehand was to focus. That when I'm going to daven, it should be something meaningful. I have seen this at Mincha. I haven't been guilty of it because, I don't walk right in. The halach is you have to walk at least 4 amos in. But, there are people who walk into shul, do a pivot, and start bowing. Go right into Shemona Esrei. One fluid moment. And they wonder why they don't find davening meaningful. Why? Because how much time did you spend preparing for it? You have to keep yourself focused and be inspired when you're going to daven. Davening without inspiration has without kavanah, it has no heart. That's why it's called avodah shebelev tefillah. You have to put your heart into it. You have to think about what you're doing. Okay, you may not be able to concentrate on every word. You may not even know what every word is, but there should be at least a consciousness that I'm talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There should be a sense of wow. That's what inspiration is. Wow. And we're surrounded by things that can inspire us. I like to say, Yiras Hashem is mistranslated as fear of God. As the Mesilas Yesharim says, when he gets to Yira, he says there's 2 types of Yira. There's Yiras HaRamamus, and there's Yiras HaEinish. Yiras HaEinish, okay, that's a very low level. I'm afraid that I'm going to get punished. Yiras HaRamamus, that is the sense of wow. I'm talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Wow. So when you wake up in the morning, I'm remembering as a kid, and it snowed during the night, and no one's really gotten up yet, and everything is covered in snow. There's something otherworldly about it. There's a sense of wow. I grew up out on Long Island. And in autumn, when the trees are changing color, which of course is a misnomer, the trees are not changing color. The leaves have always been those colors. It's just the chlorophyll makes them all look green. And as the less sunshine, it's producing less chlorophyll. But now they're getting to their real colors. But we'll use the colloquial. As the trees are turning color and you're looking at them and the sunlight reflects over and you see the scarlet and the orange and the yellows and the golds and all the colors. There's a sense of wow. I live in Yerushalayim, and Baruch Hashem, it's not just me. I have a number of kids. When we're having Shalshudas, they say, could you open up the tris so we can watch the sunset? The sunsets in Yerushalayim are just so beautiful. A sense of wow. Yeah. A very interesting thing. I was in Cape Town, South Africa. I'm hesitant to say it's the most beautiful place in the world because that's a rough thing to say when I live in Eretz Yisrael. I took a train from London to Manchester, and it's so beautiful. It's like right out of a storybook. All the little farmhouses and the greenery and just beautiful, And you look out the window. So someone told me a story of Rav Kook when he was in England. So he was on the train and someone says, isn't this beautiful? He was learning. He looked out the window. He says, yeah, it's very nice. And then they eventually made it back to Israel. The boat docked in Haifa and he got on the train to go back to Yerushalayim. And he's staring out the windows. And this was before the JNF. You understand? Everything is barren and he's just staring out the windows. And one of his Talmidim said, Rebbe, this is not as pretty as the English countryside. He says, what can I do? These mountains speak to me. So, okay. So I'm hesitant to say that because I'm in Eretz Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael speaks to me. I think from time to time, what a schus I have that I get to live in Eretz Yisrael. But the people who were working in Kyiv in South Africa told me they have a harder time in Cape Town than in Johannesburg. Because when you come to Cape Town, there's this giant rectangular shaped mountain called Tabletop Mountain. Very often there's a cloud hovering on top of it. They call it the tablecloth on top of tabletop mountain. And the city is built around the mountain, and the ocean goes around it. And the juxtaposition of the mountain and the cloud and the water is just breathtaking. You could stare for hours. And it gives you such inspiration to the point that they feel like they don't need spirituality. That's how inspired they are. When I go down to Miami Beach, I often have the schus of staying with my niece and nephew, the Khans, who are in Miami Beach, and they arranged me one time to stay with his parents, the Khans, who are just the nicest people in the world. We were going to go to a hotel, and I cannot imagine any hotel would have treated us as nicely as the Khans did. It was every morning we'd get up, and the table was set with different breakfast treats. At night we'd come home, they had the tea all set up. And I tell you, boy, I could get used to that lifestyle. Anyway, so but originally I used to live in Tower 41. I don't remember what floor, 12th floor or something. I'd go out onto their mirpes, the porch, I guess, up there, veranda. I don't know what you call it. And the building has a view from there of the ocean and the bay. You know, Miami Beach is in between the ocean and the bay. And I could just sit there for an hour, hypnotized by how beautiful it was, how inspiring. Marabu ma'asecha. Wow. That's Yiras Hashem. When you say that, wow, that's awe-inspiring. Today, people use the word, they have no idea what it means. Awesome. Wow, that was awesome. Probably not really awesome. But when you look at something like that, it's awesome. It's awe-inspiring. You see how great a Kadosh Baruch Hu is. And so we need that inspiration in our lives. And the Mesilas Yesharim says in Zrizas, if you don't have it, fake it till you make it. Act like you're inspired, and it will ignite the fire inside of you and fill you with that excitement. But people whose avodas Hashem is cold and dead, you missed what it's all about. We have to be inspired. We have to find ways to be inspired. People listen to certain speakers and certain shiurim, and they're inspiring. When I was in Chavetz Chaim, Moshe Chait, who was the Rosh Hashiva of the Chavetz Chaim branch in Eretz Yisrael, he would give shmuzin, and they were inspiring. They lifted you up and made you want to be a better person. You were inspired. My good friend, Rabbi Pesach Krohn. I say my good friend, Rabbi Pesach Krohn, because everyone he knows is his good friend. Rabbi Pesach Krohn says, there's my good friend. So I feel comfortable saying, my good friend, Rabbi Pesach Krohn. When he talks, he has a magic that as he talks, he lifts you up out of your seat. You literally are floating. That's an exaggeration. Figuratively, you're floating. He lifts you up. He inspires you. He makes you see yourself as the person you could be instead of seeing yourself just as the person that you are. And we all have to have inspiration. And sometimes the HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give us a flash of lightning that lights up the darkness. That's the inspiration, that flash. When we came to Har Sinai, we were all on the level where we were able to, see the Shekhinah. But it says in Kriyas Yamsuf, the Shivcha saw what Yechezkel Hanavi didn't see. I mean, on a tremendous level. The answer is, says Rav Tzadok HaKohen, that sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu lets you have a glimpse of the end of the picture, just to give you the inspiration to keep going. So the fact that I've had the opportunity to participate in Project Inspire is inspiring to me. And I watch the people who are there. It's an inspiration. And like I say, I'm pre-recording this, but I just remember the last time I was there, I think I actually lost weight because, most of the meals are buffet. And as I would walk to the buffet, I would be stopped by person after person after person to ask questions. They were looking from people who were seeking that inspiration. That's got to be the most beautiful thing. And so, Mirza Hashem, they should go mechol chayil, and not just inspire all the non-from Jews, but also inspire all of the from Jews, that all of us should be able to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with a ratzon, with a fire inside the way that we're supposed to. Mirza Hashem. And now we come to the question and answer portion of our program. We have a sponsor for the question and answer, sponsored anonymously by Rabbi Orlofsky show, Crazy from Staten Island. Oh, did I have a good time in Staten Island? I did a Shabbos in the youngest of Staten Island. It was one of the coldest Shabbosim, rainy, cold Shabbosim I ever had. And yet the warmth of the community kept me going. My good friend Victor Fried brought me out over there, and it was just an inspiration. Boy, was that a great Shabbos. And first time I was there, I spoke at a women's group, and I said, it's such a thrill to be here in Staten Island. This is not my first time. Many times I've driven through Staten Island on the way to someplace else. But anyway, okay. First question by Anonymous. What should one do if he just can't stop laughing and he's in a serious place, i.e. shul? Okay, this afflicts younger people more, right? Younger people don't have the self-controls that an older person does. And they also have a sense of inappropriate behavior. When people get older, they don't even know what inappropriate means anymore. They have nothing to laugh about it. So it doesn't happen so much. But definitely younger people, something happens and they just start laughing. And the fact that they know they're not supposed to be laughing causes this nervous reaction. So that used to happen to me when I was younger. I still saw it, you have that optimism of youth and there are things to giggle about and laugh at, But what I find, and you'll forgive me for this reference, but if you really need to do it, I think about the Holocaust. And suddenly I don't find it so funny. And think about something really, really sad about it. And that helps you stop. And in case you think I'm mistaken, it was in Mary Poppins when they would laugh, they would float to the top of the ceiling. And when they would think about something sad, they would sink back down. So if you can't think of something sad right on the spot because you got the giggles, think of something really sad, tragic, and it'll bring you back down to earth. So that would be my advice for that. Okay, Dina has 3 questions. We're just going to knock off all of Dina's questions here at one go. How can I balance my Ruchnius and my Gashmius? Like this. Ruchnius on one side, the Gashmius on the other, and balance it out. So I'll tell you what the Mesilas Yesharim says in Precious. Precious means you take from this world what you need. And I think that's such an important line. That means you don't make yourself feel denied. You take from the world what you need, and let's face it, there are times where we know we have enough, and we keep going anyway. That's the excess. That's where the Gashmius becomes the Gashmius for itself. Ruchnius is the Iker. Right? We're in this, we're our spiritual self. Mati Berger used to do this in a class, he would say to somebody, do you have a soul? He says, yes. Have you ever been hungry? He says, yes. He says, you have it backwards. You are a soul. Your body's been hungry. When we embrace our Gashmius and that becomes us, you understand it's going to be very sad when you die. As the Gemara in Brachas says, when a tzaddik dies, it's like removing a hair from milk. It slides right off and there's no problem. But when a Rasha dies, it's like trying to remove some cotton from a thistle. The little pieces keep leaving behind. Says the Maharal, that's why when we die, our bodies have to decay to release all those little nefesh McNuggets that are stuck inside of our guf. And so the more that we embrace our Gashmius, the harder it is to focus on our Ruchnius. Or as the Gemara says, before you daven that the Torah go into you, daven that the food not go into you. What does that mean? That means that if food is something that you wax poetic about and not just that you eat in order to sustain you, you'll find that the Gashmius starts to take you over. And therefore, Gashmius is there to serve a purpose, and to tie in with what we were talking about earlier, it can sometimes be used as inspiration. What do I mean like that? Yeah. I heard this story from Rabbi Weinstein, teaches in Derech. He had learned by Rav Gusman. And he says Rav Gusman told the story that it was him, it was Rav Hutna, I think it was Rav Chaim Zimmerman, and I think there was a fourth, but I don't remember the story. And he says they were working on a sugya. They were really stuck on a sugya. And they said, if we solve this sugya, we'll go out to eat. Okay. And they worked very, very hard, and they came up with a shot, and they went out. They went out to eat. And so the way Rabbi Guzman ends the story is, I won't tell you who ate the most, but whoever learned the most ate the most. So the Gashmius is there to inspire you. I was teaching Gemara in Derech one year, second year shir. It was, each guy was just a superstar, you know, and diamonds in the rough. I had a chance to hone them. And I turned them into monsters. I taught them how to ask all the annoying questions that I ask. And that I need Rashi, the smartest guy in the world, to tell me it's dark outside when it's night. Well, what's he trying to tell me? What is this? You know, they all picked it up. They took to it pretty naturally, and we were all fighting and arguing. Anyway, one time, and I had a rule: we only did Gemara, Rashi, and Tosfos. That was it. And whatever we needed to get shot, Gemara, Rashi, and Tosfos. So we were stuck on a Tosfos. We went to a Marsha, and the Marsha, we were stuck in the Marsha. We went to the Kani Re'eh, and we couldn't make heads or tails out of him. We were working very hard. And I mean, one of the guys in the shir, David Spinka, he says to me, Rebbe, says, what do you do when you just can't figure it out? I said, me? When things get really bad? I have a chocochino. Chocochino was like a cappuccino, only it's with chocolate instead of coffee. He says, does it help? I said, oh, yes. So we made up then and there that if we figure out pshat, we will all go out for chocochinos. And eventually we came up with a pshat. And I remember we made a whole day of it. It was before Parshas Truma. That was the week of Parshas Truma. So we went to the Machon HaMikdash, where they have examples of the different kalim in the base of Mikdash and the Beit Kahuna. And we went there, and then we davened by the Kaisel. And then we went out to have chocochinos. And as these budding Talmidei Chachamim were sitting around, one of them turns to me and says, you know, it really does help. That's the goal. Coffee. What is the goal of coffee? Coffee is there to give you the good feeling, the nachas ruach. As the Mesil Shasharm says in Perek Aleph, the physical pleasures are here to give us nachas ruach and yishuv hadas. We should be relaxed. Gives us that good feeling, gives us the motivation to go and do what we need to do. And that's ideally what the Gashmius is supposed to be in this world. Okay, and the second question is, does Hashem punish? That's a tricky question. It's a tricky question because you have to know what a punishment is. An onesh. The letter ayin, of course, is an ayin, an I. Nosh means to fall, right? Noshim are the nashar is when the fruit falls from the tree, Ayin nash means see that you have stumbled. Now listen to this. Listen to a Gemara. It says that if nothing bad happens to you for a certain period of time, you have to be suspicious that Hashem just gave up on you. Doesn't care about you anymore. Just do what you want. There's no point in punishing somebody who's not going to gain anything. They say the pshat where Kadosh Baruch Hu will punish ad shilei shim v'yad ribayim to the third or fourth generation. Why? What happens then? Because what do you call a Jew who hasn't been for 3 or 4 generations? A Christian. They don't even know they're Jewish anymore. So what's the point of punishing them? They're not Jewish. They're not going to get the message. The purpose of a punishment is to help the person see that they've stumbled. And unfortunately, the reality is that people are motivated when bad things happen to them to re-examine their life and make a decision. What should I be doing with my life now? So a punishment is not vindictive. I'm going to get even with you. A punishment is there as a means for us to be able to grow. So the way I put it is, you see that somebody is involved in really unhealthy activity. And you're trying to talk to them and it doesn't help. So what do? So, give them a little push. What are you doing? What are you, crazy? You got to shake them out of it. That's what a Kadosh Baruch Hu does. When what we look at as a punishment is something that is there for us to wake up and look at our lives and say, as Jean Valjean does in Les Miserables, I have become so miserable. When you turn around and you realize how I've become such a miserable person. So the onus is there for us to realize, wow, it's time for me to put my life back together. The last thing is, what happens when I do an Aveira? Well, it does a lot of things. One is, it makes you a worse person. Rav Dessler explains this, that there's a sliding scale. Because right now, you're only capable of doing something so bad and only capable of doing something so good. You're stuck within these parameters. A yeshiva guy once came to me, he says, Rebbe, I did the worst thing in the world. I said, I don't believe it. He goes, I did. I said, you killed your mother and ate her? He goes, no. I said, oh, Baruch Hashem. And then that's not even the worst thing I could think of. It was just the first one that came to mind. I could think of worse. He missed mincha. Okay, the point is that there's a parameter. There's only so bad I'm going to be, and there's only so good I'm going to be. But every time I do an action, I shift the parameters. And that's the idea of mitzvah gereris mitzvah and avera gereris avera. Every time I do something bad, I open up the potential to do something worse. And that's why it's the slippery slope. You start down this path that ends poorly. And so that's one thing that happens. The other thing that happens is every Aveira, regardless of how serious it is, means that I don't believe in God. Because if I believed in God, then I wouldn't have gone against what he said. Yeah? And that's why when we clap al chet, we say, al chet shechatani lefanecha, and then we fill in whatever the sin is, but it doesn't make a difference. The first thing is, you told me not to do this. And so every chet that we do is in fact a rebellion against the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And the third thing is that it destroys the world. Now, if you're very big, like a Korach, then you can really shake things up in Shemayim and Aretz and do all kinds of different things. But it has, obviously, physical effects in the world. We know what the Gemara says about earthquakes and things like this, that they're caused by our actions. There's things that we do, suddenly it doesn't rain, there's droughts, there's all kinds of stuff that takes place. So it happens in the physical world, but it also happens in the spiritual world. You all know that. Every time you do a mitzvah, it's a brick in the third base of Mikdash. When you do an Aveira, you pulled out a brick. So if you're a small person, you can't do a lot of damage, but it's cumulative. It's interesting when it says Lashon Hara is Keneged Gilei Raya Shrichas Dam Avodah Zarah. So the Mefarshim asked, then why is it Harag Val Yavar? It says because it's not the sin itself, it's the fact that it's repeated so many times. And every time we do something bad, we make the world into a worse place. It might be just a little bit, but it takes many pebbles joining together to create an avalanche. So that's why we have to be careful. And that's it for this episode. If you want to find out more about the show, you can go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com. You can ask a question. You can sponsor an episode. You can sponsor a question and answer. You can sponsor a Parsha in 5. You can sign up for one of our online shiurim. In fact, I just got an email from somebody who wants to sign up for the Mesilas Yesharim, and she says, but I can't do it live. Can I watch the recording afterwards? And yes, there are people who do that, who are in the shiur. They can't always come. They listen to the recording afterwards. The Tefillah shiur, the Daf Yomi shiur in the morning. And that's it for this week. Until next time, I am Dovid Orlofsky, and this has been the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode, and we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.